I am very, very pleased to introduce our two panelists for tonight's program, Hannah Krebs and Alice Hilton. Hannah is a principal planner with the Lexington Fayette County government, and Alice is a founding member of Living Streets Lexington, which is an organization we have partnered with a number of times. It is a great organization. We recommend checking them out. And they are both former, still current members of the STREEET Safety Task Force, which is what we're here to talk about today, and you'll learn all about that. So we are very, very pleased to have you all here. And let's just go Hannah and then Alice. I'll ask y'all to just introduce yourselves in a little more detail than I did.
I should have done this before we start. Hello. Can you all hear me? Yeah. Fantastic. Okay, so thank you so much for that warm welcome. Happy to be here this evening. My name is Hannah, and like Ethan said, I'm with LFUCG Division of Planning. I was telling a gentleman before we got started, but I'm on a team called, it's like a specific section in the Division of Planning, Outreach and Strategic Planning. And that's a new team. There's 4 of us dedicated to that purpose. And we've been around, I've been in the role just about a year. So we're getting our feet under us. We've got a lot of ideas, a lot of passion and sort of hopes. And it's been really exciting kind of launching that kind of new effort. But we're sort of tasked with kind of improving how the Division of Planning connects with the general public, kind of educating and kind of making it easier for folks in Lexington to connect to the planning process, make it a little friendlier, a little more accessible. So that's me.
Good? Yes? Okay, awesome. Hi, my name is Alice Hilton, and I, like Ethan said, I'm one of the founding members of Living Streets Lexington, which is a new advocacy group, and we've been around for I think like almost 2 years at this point, but I'm going to keep describing us as new probably forever, and I would say we're still in the process of founding and kind of figuring out what it looks like to be an advocacy group in Lexington who does work around like safer streets for all users, and then just more comfortable, more accessible transportation options. And there are some other folks in this room who are involved in that process, and other members of Living Streets Lexington. So thank you to all of you for being here, and thanks to the LSL folks especially. So.
You just show of hands, who's an LSL member? All right, cool.
Quinn was here.
Oh, he left.
Bye, Quinn.
All right, well, so we'll get into the details of the STREEET Safety Task Force in a minute, but one of the guiding principles or philosophies of the task force was this complete streets movement that's kind of making waves across the country. So for each of you, in your own words, could you tell us a little bit about complete streets? What does it mean to you, and how have you seen other cities implement it?
Okay, I'm going to dive right in. She's looking at me. I find complete streets to be, I think it's at once incredibly identifiable and familiar to everyone, and on the other hand, it's sort of a term that means nothing to most people. I think I saw this on Nashville has a great sort of landing page for their complete streets work, and they're very clear about it being both a process. So it's a method and it's a way of doing something, and it's also a final product. So it's essentially kind of planning, designing, and building, operating, and maintaining our entire transportation network. So not just streets, but our sidewalks, our transit system. It can get even more expansive if you're connecting it really closely to the environment, and you can talk about greenways, trails. It's really just about making sure that everyone in the community, whoever they are, whatever their circumstances, they have choices for getting around. They are not limited to getting from their house to their friends, their house to their work, whatever, in a car. They have options. So I think of complete streets as choice. But yeah, process, method, final product.
Yeah, I mean, I think exactly that. A complete street is one that serves anyone in a community, kind of regardless of how they get around or how they want to get around. I think Fred's example of the ideal is you walk out of where you live and can decide, like, do I want to take the bus today? Do I want to ride a bike? Do I want to walk? Or maybe it's super cold and rainy, and I want to, you know, call some kind of affordable car share or carpool with a friend, or take my own personal vehicle. Yeah, and I think really trying to highlight that streets for so long have been designed primarily around moving cars fast, and this is a way to both try and design and retrofit streets and our transportation system to accommodate everyone safely and comfortably.
I might actually add, this is great because like you talk and then things go off in my head, but I imagine we'll get into this, and definitely Fred and Greg got into this, but I think Complete Streets too, in a way, is opening up the conversation about transportation to include land use in a way that for decades was not happening, which is why we have the city we have. So I think that's an important element. It's also what's happening, you know, on the land that the streets, you know, is going in between. So.
Yeah, absolutely. They are very much tied together in ways that maybe we spent a long time not recognizing. So it's important to bring that into the conversation. So y'all were both involved with the Street Safety Task Force. Can you tell us a little bit about how that task force got started? What were its initial goals, and you know, what was sort of the process and timeline for creating it?
Yeah, so I do, you know, I want to recognize, like, Tori is here, who's legislative aide to Vice Mayor Wu, who is the one who formed this task force, and so I think in some ways Hannah and I aren't
right.
the experts to be talking about the history of that. But I think crucially the task force came about in large part after 2024, which was a terrible, terrible year for traffic violence in Lexington. 38 people died on our roadways during 2024. Each of those people obviously was like a human being with a family and with relationships and an individual. But I think also crucially, one of those people was Mia Ibrahim, who was a community leader and part of a LGBTQ running group that with lots of like really strong community connections, and also was killed in a crosswalk in broad daylight. I mean, you know, like was doing everything right. And so I think there was just this general feeling of if this person who, you know, was just out for a run was in a crosswalk, someone ran a red light, and then nothing happens, then what are we doing? So there was a lot of momentum behind, like, what are we gonna do about creating safer roadways? Yeah.
And I think I'll just add to that, I think there was a sense of urgency, as you kind of allude to, and a real desire kind of welling up from the community, which is as it should be. And our elected officials were very responsive to that and recognizing, okay, we need to put some concerted effort towards near-term action. What are some shorter-term projects, initiatives, approaches that we can take? Because we've got a lot of plans. I'm a planner, you know, I know there's a lot of plans, but what actions can we take in the near term? So I think the task force was kind of really emphasizing that.
Yeah. Well, that kind of perfectly answered my next question as well, which is telling us a little bit about how, you know, or why this issue is so important. As we all know, traffic and pedestrian fatalities have been on the rise in Lexington, but also nationwide for the last few years. So speaking of some of the things that the task force did, and it wrapped up in December, what are some of the recommendations that you all made to the council that you think can address pedestrian and cyclist safety in the near term?
I actually was a bit of a nerd and I printed it out.
Yes.
And because it's a lot. I mean, to be quite frank, there's a whole lot of energy, there's a lot of imagination and vision. I think it's helpful to maybe kind of describe them, how they're organized, which is around kind of the four E's. There's a reason why it's the Streets Task Force. So it's engineering, education, and engagement, which go hand in hand, and enforcement. And what I thought was a little bit funny about the whole thing is that the deeper we got into it, the more we realized that the distinctions between those is not real, and that actually all 4 of those elements need to intersect and overlap, and many sort of ideas that we were coming up with and sort of projects had a little bit of all of those. But I would sort of, to attempt to answer the question, is sort of one sort of emphasis was on kind of generating more what we call quick build projects. So anyone in the room familiar with the High Street quick build pilot? I figured this was a room that, you know, it's got a lot of people into that. So that was great. That we've just kind of launched that into, okay, we're keeping it. You know, we might even tweak it, and it's not decided yet, but who knows? Someday maybe it might actually be more permanent. But basically, one of the things the task force uplifted was, okay, we need to do more projects along those lines. So there was a sort of appeal to do. One of the recommendations was to do traffic circle quick builds. So traffic circle is a lot like a roundabout. It's much smaller. It's on the sort of more neighborhood scale, smaller streets. But it's quite economical to kind of put in sort of a removable. It is you can undo it, but it's sort of like a rubberized sort of circle, kind of median, putting in ramps and kind of improving and enhancing some neighborhood intersections. And so that's traffic engineering is currently in the thick of figuring out, okay, where are we going to put those pilots? I guess I could actually like look at this instead of just. And this is all, we should add, this is all online, as most things are these days. So you should feel free to explore it. And I would say, you know, if something speaks to you, talk to a friend, talk to a family member, and build some energy around it. The no parking in bike lanes ordinance was one of the recommendations. A big thing that's I'm more closely tied to, and then I'll stop blabbing and maybe Alice can add something, but is sort of amplifying the education and the sort of, I was going to say marketing, but the sort of how we talk about our streets, what it means to have safe streets, what complete streets even is, and so there's several things, several recommendations that require us internally as a government to kind of streamline and connect with across divisions to make sure that we're all kind of speaking the same language, similar to what Greg and Fred were saying about Lextran, but then also externally, so different divisions like the section that I'm on in the Division of Planning, also the Public Information and Engagement team, which is in the Environmental Quality and Public Works division. The two of us sort of working together to kind of add to existing community education efforts like the Community Environmental Academy. So one of the recommendations is we're going to be introducing some planning modules into that so we can kind of give people that step back, that kind of higher altitude, bigger picture. This is how all of this connects, and this is how it relates to city planning, and city planning kind of being the overarching umbrella for many of these kind of decisions and changes that we want to make. Good?
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, and I think I would just add that, so like Hannah said, there were a number, like 3 or 4 recommendations that came tied to each of those identified areas: engineering, enforcement, education, engagement. And it was time so that those recommendations were finished up in alignment with the fund balance discussion. Mm-hmm. So in the fall, you know, the city looks at how much funding they planned to spend, but for whatever reason was unspent, like things came in under budget. And so it was able to be connected directly to funding, which was really exciting. So there was like 375,000-ish that went to a roundabout study in 5 different locations, which I think is awesome. And then, yeah, just a sort of clarifying and identifying the need for a formalized quick build process, which is great because the federal funding landscape is bleak and looks like it will be for a while. And so figuring out how to do these immediate safety projects relatively quickly, relatively cheaply is going to be really crucial, I think, in the next like 2 to 5 years. But I think also really recognizing that the task force, it's not like everyone involved is like, all right, we're done, that was great, like everyone go home. I think I'm feels like, and I'm very hopeful it is just one stepping stone in kind of a larger process towards culture shift around streets in Lexington, and people working together and kind of breaking down the silos that definitely exist in the city government right now.
Yes.
Yeah. Go ahead.
No, just emphatic yes.
It's funny that you mentioned the roundabout traffic circle. I attended a number of those meetings, and I remember something that came up a couple of times was, what's the difference between a roundabout and a traffic circle? If you want, as a brief aside, if you
well, I'll do my best. I'm not a traffic engineer, so that I have to put that out there. But traffic circle, something closer to maybe like what is, I think it's on Fontaine, kind of near Henry Clay. It's sort of a smaller sort of turning movement, and again, it's not on a collector or a major road. It's a much smaller scale situation. You do still need to have ramps. You want to have crosswalks. Ramps meaning entering the sidewalk from the road, so you can cross safely and accessibly. And then a roundabout, is bigger and is kind of intended. At least I think of it as an alternative to a signalized intersection. It doesn't have to be replacing an intersection that has lights, but oftentimes that's where it has the most impact, as I understand it. So that's the reason why they're kind of differentiated, is because they're addressing two very different things. One's more, it is congestion and sort of traffic speeds, and the other is more traffic calming, and sort of giving the opportunity, I think, to do even some placemaking. So when I say placemaking, I mean putting in maybe some art or some planters around the traffic circle. Roundabouts, just it's bigger and it's yeah.
Yeah. So next time y'all are driving down Reynolds Road or Cooper Drive, you'll know the difference.
Yes, and I will say the word on the street is that the Reynolds one is not the best, because it's too big. The radius is too big, so it doesn't actually slow speeds as good as it should. But get out into the country, and KYTC is doing a ton of roundabouts where they're taking signalized intersections and they're turning them into roundabouts, and those are perfect. So good.
So let's talk a little bit about land use. I know that this was a little outside the scope of the task force, but as you said, it is a really important part of the conversation that we're having about our streets and how we can make them work for everybody. What kind of developments are best along these corridors, thinking of High Street where they're improving the bike lane over there, or other places where quick builds are going up? What kinds of developments are best along those corridors where those improvements are happening? And can you tell us a little bit about what those kinds of projects look like and who they're meant to serve?
Yeah, I mean, I think to answer that question indirectly, I want to highlight that land use planning is transportation planning and vice versa. Like you don't do one without also simultaneously doing the other, even if you're not talking about one. And so I think that if we as a community can really embrace that fact that when you do one, you do the other, even if you're not doing it intentionally, then I think the good kind of land use development, transit-oriented development, walkable development, what about the traffic, like where will we park? I think it all comes hand in hand. And I think when you really intentionally make that connection and plan around people and think like, what are the people going to do? How are they going to get around? Then, the walkable development follows.
I think it makes me think a little bit of Greg's, or maybe it was Fred, talking about the coverage versus frequency. Thank you. And it really feels like there is no end to the issue and the problem if we're not doing them both simultaneously, and we're not somehow, anytime there is a new development, it absolutely needs to, the transportation piece of it has to be front and center as well. It's not something that can sort of be looked at on its own. And I think part of what is good about this sort of general kind of momentum that seems to be building, certainly on the government side, there's more and more folks who are on the same page, more and more people talking along these lines, is that it's helping to correct that. I'm just repeating what you said basically, but helping to correct that sort of those distinctions, you know, and then the sort of the silos that form between all the different actors, you know, it's really helping to kind of coalesce, and I think, yeah, but maybe to more directly, possibly, is I think, you know, we talk a lot about density, we talk about mixed use. I haven't experimented with this phrasing too much, so hopefully hopefully it works, but density doesn't have to mean, you know, a high-rise sort of large kind of block that has kind of a big mass when you walk by it. Density can be sort of like Disney Main Street or like the English Village, you know, like the sort of quaint, picturesque English countryside village that people can picture. It has to do with kind of the mix and the proximity, the scale. It can be a lot in a small area. It doesn't have to be so tall. Anyway, Disney Main Street, I think, is what we're going for.
That's very good. I mean, when you think about some of the places in our city where they are the most walkable, but also the safest and most accommodating for people on different modes of transit, they are the places that look like
Exactly.
Disney Main Street.
Yeah,
I think.
they're not scary.
You know,
They're not
yeah.
big, tall buildings. Yeah, exactly.
Well, so I'll throw a curveball at y'all, if you don't mind. So you mentioned the High Street bike lane. I love the bike lane. It's awesome. One of the things that bike lane meant for High Street was going down from 2 lanes of traffic to 1. And if y'all were paying attention to WKYT during that time, there were a lot of folks that maybe weren't so happy about that. So how do we talk to folks who maybe take issue with the fact that their car commutes might be a little bit slower in the name of safety for everybody else who shares the road with them?
Okay.
I know that's a loaded question.
No. It's okay. I want you to answer the question, but I wanted to kind of clarify that the High Street project. I think we learned a lot internally because the High Street project, the intention was to reduce it to 1 lane. In doing that, there's extra space. So when we reduce it to 1 lane, we add on-street parking. Those were like the 2, and then we have this extra, so we're gonna put a bike lane. And we recognize pretty quickly, everyone just thinks it's a bike project, which no shade to bike projects, but it wasn't simply that. I would like you to answer the question.
Well, so part of the reason that the High Street pilot project, which I guess we shouldn't call it a pilot project anymore, but part of the reason that it's able to stay, so it had like a year-long testing period, and then there was going to be a big decision about, do we take it out, do we let it stay? And so the city's Complete Streets manager, coordinator, Brandy Peacher, who is, if you have not met her, she's lovely. She's a real powerhouse.
Totally.
But she put together like a 15-page report documenting, you know, here's what travel conditions were like before, and here's what travel conditions are like afterwards. And actually, I think that travel times have like increased by a few seconds.
I could be misremembering, but I'm pretty sure that the average travel time in that section increased by 12 seconds.
Yeah, so it's actually working more efficiently than it was. Yeah, or at least on average across the course of the day. I know that there was some traffic like tweaking that needed to happen halfway through.
Yeah.
But I think figuring out how to communicate, I mean, you can't just release a 15-page report and be like, look, you're welcome, everyone.
Yeah.
I do think that figuring out how, because there's also the difference between how it feels and you know what the data actually looks like on paper. And so I know that there are some people who maybe the traffic is a little bit more congested in the morning, and that's how it feels. Mm-hmm. And so then I think, if anyone has a kind of magic answer for how to talk about traffic and congestion and like how we all share space together and how we create good conditions for everyone, I'd love to.
Well,
it's something we're trying to figure out every day.
Actually, this morning, in fact, we were talking about it, a team of folks, and you know, I think it's getting across to people that one less person in a car, so one more person walking, one more person taking the bus, one more person biking is one less person in a car. And has everyone seen this sort of visual graphic that kind of shows, what is it, like 40 people, this is how much space they take in a road, 40 people in a bus, this is how much space it takes up, 40 people in cars, how much space that takes up. So I think there's something about, like, something along those lines, where it may not be you that's biking or walking or taking the bus, but because we're making it easier for other people, your car trip will be easier because there will be less people taking up space.
Yeah. So I guess the lesson is everybody benefits. Yeah. Okay, well, I just have one more for y'all, and then we'll get into some audience Q&A. But what are some things folks can do, whether they be big or small, that can support the work that the task force wrapped up or is continuing to do?
I mean, so we got to see these questions in advance and kind of think through some talking points. And it's funny because I imagine this as if I was talking to a room full of strangers. So I feel like all of my, things like reach out to your council members, tell them that you value this kind of work and that you hope that they'll keep funding it. But I feel like knowing a lot of the people in this room, I know that you are all doing a lot of really, I feel like I can see like 10 people who could be sitting in this chair right now and speaking to this topic. So I would say, I think that probably the biggest thing is just that we all need to keep relationship building, connecting with each other, like building a real community around this that's able to press it as, this is something that we care about and it's something that touches everyone who lives in Lexington.
I beautifully said. I would, just sort of maybe add a layer of listening to that and thinking about that. Then maybe for this room, the directive is find people who don't think like you and have a conversation with them about this. Easier said than done, I know, but perhaps that is a step. Talk to a family member who you're not sure if they feel or think the same way that you do, and sort of say, I've got this thing that I'm really passionate about. Here's why. What does that sound like to you, and can we talk about it? Because to Alice's point, and to Living Streets Lexington, I want like 10 more Living Streets Lexingtons about different things. I want more, as someone who's in government and as someone who used to work in a nonprofit outside of government, I have this kind of interesting kind of view on things, I think. But I would love to see more coalitions between residents, less kind of one-on-one resident to elected official. That's great, keep doing that. But much more resident to resident, that kind of relationship building, because I think, like we were saying with the task force and how it got started, it was because there was enough of a wellspring of community feeling and requesting action that elected officials felt like they needed to answer. So I think the directive is to talk to your neighbors.
Yeah, I love talking to neighbors. That's always, yeah. Well, thank you all so much for being here and having this conversation. I think the ultimate takeaway is when our land use and our transit and when our streets all work together to create these healthy, vibrant neighborhoods, we get a city that is better for everybody. No matter how you travel, no matter where you live, work, or play, it works for us all. So it's really important. We're going to open it up to some audience questions, and then that'll just about wrap up our night. So if you have one, raise your hand.
One of the recommendations that came out of the STREET Task Force was, so in the state of Kentucky, currently by state constitution, we can't use cameras, automated enforcement, to enforce red light running. And that in states that are able to use automated enforcement, it's a pretty effective, it's an incredibly effective tactic. And so one of the recommendations that came out of the task force was for Lexington to work alongside other cities to try and change that at the state level. And that, who knows if that will be successful or how long it will take, but it would make a huge difference, I think, especially in red light running. So, and I know that didn't answer the first part of your question, yeah.
aware of the state here.
I'm not sort of in the thick of the data piece, but I know that the Lexington Area Metropolitan Planning Organization, which is sort of the federal program that oversees funding for transportation, they have a pretty significant amount of data. And then the state transportation cabinet has done recently a vulnerable road user study. So there is data, and it is all public, and it is all in digital form. I think it's maybe not so immediately visible, so it might require a bit of hunting, but it does exist, and it is sort of kind of what, for instance, the roundabout study, any of those kinds of decisions around kind of where are we going to locate some pilots or quick builds. It's oriented, it's not just sort of sentiment or our feeling, it's looking at a map that shows us hotspots. Oh my God, well, that feels silly. Okay, Street Fest. Street Fest is a city event that is happening on May 16th from 10 to 1. Okay, we're gonna be there, so you should all be there as well. But it is essentially, it started maybe 4 years ago now, and it was sort of, it's funded by the MPO, this entity that I just mentioned, and it is intended to give the city an opportunity to experience streets as places for people, as vibrant, sort of joyful places, and to kind of help our community kind of reimagine a road and a street as a place and not simply a throughway. So it's a big street party. It used to happen on Oliver Lewis Way over here, but now it happens on Shropshire Avenue over off of Midland. So if you know where the Met is, or the Artist Village, or Manchester Coffee, Charles Young Park,
Yeah.
duh. Yes, thank you. It's right there. So, and do you want to talk about the fun element?
Yeah, so last year we experimented with bringing super temporary, I mean, we mixed like flour and water and food coloring and made super temporary paint and let people just paint the roadway. Specifically, we were like, this is a chicane, and a chicane is when you take a super wide straight road and you make it twist a little bit to create a little bit of friction to slow cars down. And so we're like, this is a chicane, paint it in. Like, this is a traffic circle,
Yeah.
paint it in. And so we'll be doing that again this year. And the exciting thing is that this year it will be leading into a street mural asphalt art project that should be installed sometime in late summer, early fall, which will be, it should be really cool.
Very cool.
So.
First one for the city, so it was very exciting.
I went to Street Fest last year. If you've never gone, you should go. It is a lot of fun.
What's the date again?
May 16th, so not this Saturday, but next Saturday. And there'll be, Lexington will have a bus there. And
Thanks, Lexington.
yes, and music, food, it's free. Okay, two planning, these are planning things, so they're not going to be super satisfying. But there is the MPO, again, that entity I mentioned. They did, I think 3 years ago now, they did a feasibility study for, they called it like the East Lex Connectivity Trail or something. I can't remember what they called it exactly. But basically connecting the Brighton Trail, all the way up to Isaac Memorial Art Garden, coming largely on Liberty. So that was, and basically they looked at, can we fund this? When can we fund this? What is it going to look like? Where would it go? All sort of that sort of tenuous planning phase. I don't want to give you false information. I don't remember if it's in the midterm funding plan, but I know that it's certainly in the plan to make that connection and the trail connection. And then the other thing Iris is actually in the room. Iris is with the Division of Planning as well, and we are about to kick off, I mentioned her because she's managing the study, we're about to kick off a Winchester Road study similar to Imagine New Circle, Imagine Nicholasville Road, so taking kind of a comprehensive look at a major corridor and coming up with strategies and timelines, funding, timelines for improving not just the transportation, but the land use, looking at it really like both things together all along Winchester. And I forget the beginning and end. Is it Third?
It includes what you're talking about. It goes from Third and Midland all the way out to Bahama, which is Greenbrier, and sidewalks are exactly what we're looking at, and we're really.
Thank you, Iris. Sorry to put you on the spot.
I think I would just add, so the city has a sidewalk fund that has, every year they put about $1 million to $3 million in it to build sidewalks for the coming year, and that builds, I don't know, maybe like a quarter of a mile of sidewalk,
not much.
if that.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that we are always thinking about is just how do you put pressure on the city? How do you really express and get everyone on the same page that someone walking like in the grassy shoulder along a highway is like not acceptable and not how a city takes care of its residents. And so how do we get more funding to the sidewalk fund and just say like we need a connected sidewalk system. So.
I'm glad you brought that point up because it reminds me of what we were talking about with Lexington in terms of like as the crow flies 400 meters versus like what it actually feels like. And I do think that's an element of the Complete Streets conversation. It's more and more we're thinking, okay, maybe on paper this is what it looks like, but we need to do more walk audits. What does it actually feel like? Because that better informs the decisions that are made.
Well, and especially for
That's a great question that I do not have the answer to.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like the hope is that the city would just invest in its own system and not contract it out to some big, like national private company. And yeah, I mean that's the question with cameras and automated enforcement is what are you gaining versus what are you giving up? But I do, the National Vision Zero network have really endorsed automated enforcement as something that is less biased and less dangerous to. You would rather, I think in many instances, you'd rather have your license plate, like just have a picture snapped of it and then get something in the mail than actually have someone, like a police officer, pull you over. So it's pros and cons.
All right, well, that just about wraps us up. We're just about done. If you have more questions, go and find Alice and Hannah.